Vanakkam. Hello friends. As you know, we have been taking a journey into exploring the roots of our civilization and looking at how we can establish our antiquity with the aid of language and literature, as archaeological evidences in terms of inscriptions have not allowed us to go beyond 3rd century BCE. Now, taking into account Tamil language as a tool to establish the earlier roots of our civilization. Now, if you were to take the ancient languages of the world and see how they have been grouped based on the availability of written texts, the languages of the ancient world have been broadly classified into the following groups. We have the Mediterranean language group, which includes Sumerian, Hattic, Hurrian, and Elamite, that is, including Akkadian. The Afro-Asiatic group, which is also known as Hamitic, that include Egyptian and Semitic languages and those of the northern parts of Africa. The large branch of Indo-European languages that has Anatolian, Mycenaean Greek and Indo-Iranian trees, the Sino-Tibetan or Old Chinese that has China, Tibet and Burma. This hovers around the 2nd millennium BCE. And then we have Ural-Altic belonging to the Siberian, Lapland and Finland regions. Now, what is of interest to us is that Tamil, which is part of the Dravidian group of languages, remember in the earlier episode we saw how Bishop Robert Caldwell classified the Dravidian or South Indian group of languages, and to use Caldwell's own words, he was not the first to do it, as he claims. The Sanskrit philologists of his time had already classified or used the term Dravidian to refer to an appellation of South Indian people and their spoken languages. Now, the Dravidian languages, of which Tamil is the oldest, has not been identified or classified under any of the ancient languages of the world. Why? Simply because linguists have not been able to relate them to any of these larger groups. Now, if you go to the Wikipedia on ancient languages, it also enlists a large group of isolates, meaning that they are independent languages, of course old with their written scripts, and Tamil has none of the cognates to be linked to any of these languages, cognates being the root words or identities that linguists look for in two languages to sort of connect them. And the only language against which it has been marked as Dravidian may be connected is Elamite. Now, Elamite is of course an extinct language spoken in ancient Iran, east of Mesopotamia, in a region which is known as the Kingdom of Susa. And as early as 1913, again Caldwell himself started an extensive research into seeing if Tamil or the Dravidian group could somehow be related to the Elamite language, partly because history also revealed a lot of trade connects between the Indian subcontinent, both in the north, that is the Indus, and the south, to the Mesopotamian Iranian regions. And though his research itself, later linguists claim, were of very high quality, it didn't see any further progress until 1970, when David McFlynn came into the picture, and he started an extensive research in trying to establish this link between Elamite and Dravidian languages, trying to connect a lot of root words. And though he did carry it forward to some extent, as on date, linguists have not been able to accept the theory connecting these two. So again, if you see these group of languages, the Mediterranean group is that which has provoked the most interest among linguists in trying to connect Tamil, and the next in question would be the Sumerian language spoken in the Sumerian civilization, which we saw in one of the previous episodes and claimed as the first civilization that sort of defined what is meant by the term civilization itself in terms of world history. And a lot of their history is known to us how? By the 100,000 plus clay tablets that archaeologists were able to retrieve in intact condition, but more importantly were able to read the cuneiform script. And here again, partly because the successive empires that came about in the Sumerian region, such as the Akkadian and the Persian, for a long time used the Sumerian script. So there was evidence in later history, comparatively later history, that archaeolinguists could use to study and interpret the cuneiform tablets themselves. These have given an extensive idea as to what has been their history, how they had developed their laws and rules. And one of the earliest researchers who took this up was Professor Sadasivam, a Sri Lankan linguist and great Tamil scholar, who did extensive research, and he was in the middle of his magnum opus, that is the etymological dictionary of the Sumero-Dravidian language, which unfortunately didn't come to an end because of his untimely demise in the year 1988. But he went to great lengths to try to establish a connect between the Sumerian civilization, which is centered around the Persian Gulf, as you know, on the banks of the Euphrates and Tigris. And from his studies, he compared 501 sets of cognates between Sumerian and Dravidian Tamil, and found that the Sumerian grammar possessing almost identical characteristics with those of the prehistoric Tamil, so much so that he claimed that both Sumerian and the Dravidians spoke the same language and probably lived in some mountainous region for a long time before they separated from each other. Following this, in current times, one of the foremost proponents of the theory of linking Sumerian language with the Tamil script in current times is Dr. K. Loganathan from the University of Saints, Malaysia, who has been doing very thorough research in trying to find the linguistic cognates between Tamil and Sumeria. And he has been taking this one step forward by also looking at similarities in civilization and culture that aid his linguistic study. For example, one of the earliest available written texts for a very beautiful book on moral sciences in the Sumerian language is the Surupak's Neri. The earliest written tablets which are available from 2600 BCE, and Dr. Loganathan observes how they have highly developed cosmological thinkings registered in that, much similar to the thought process of the Tamil saints who have registered it in our Tamil works. And not only that, there are also a lot of cultural similarities that he captures. And based on his research, even then, he says the Sumerian civilization started dying out by around 1900 BCE, but then again our Tamil texts and the archaeological evidences don't go beyond 3rd century BCE. So here again is a gap of 1500 years which he has not found a way of bridging as yet. Nevertheless, his research has been taken on by quite a few other writers who have added their own accounts and brought about many publications, like how we saw in our previous episodes the Sangam, and how the Irena Rahapurul Urai was able to sort of try to establish a 10,000-year-old antiquity by giving the dates of the middle and the first Sangams. And in the previous episodes, we have been seeing how people have taken on their own theories on the Kumari Kandam, trying to take the antiquity of Tamil to way back to even 50,000 BCE. All these are nice as theories, but none of them have been established by historical or archaeological evidences. Now, if I were to mention a couple of interesting books, one would be the Kumari Kandama Sumeriama, an interesting book by R. Prabhakaran, and for example another book would be the குமரி கண்டம் முதல் சுமேரியா வரை தமிழர் வரலாறுகள் by Dhanabhakyam Gunabala. Now in Mr. Prabhakaran's work, it is interesting to see how he takes place names from the Tamil country and tries to identify them with the various cities in the Mesopotamian area, which had several such capitals cleanly outlined by Professor Sadasivam and others in their works, such as Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lhasa and Nippur. And for example, what R. Prabhakaran says is that Eridu somehow became Madurai, and he has given his own root theories to establish this. And not only that, he takes the mythology of the Machavaдаram, where we know the story. Vishnu comes as a fish, and you have the king Satyavarada bathing in the Kridumal river, where he catches the small fish in his hands. We will not go into the story here. Now, for those of us living in Madurai, we normally associate this story with our own Kridumal river, which of course is now in a very pathetic state. Now, what Prabhakaran tries to do is claim that Kridumal, meaning looking like a garland, actually refers to the Euphrates and Tigris. And the story itself, Machavaдаram, happened there. And he goes on to show an etymology of how Pahruli river is actually the Euphrates and Kumari river is actually the Tigris. Now, all this leads to a lot of interesting ideologies, but more research has to be done, and history and archaeology should support these theories. Now, while talking of these civilizations back home, of course, we have the Indus Valley civilization and its undeciphered script. And as of now, since the script itself is undeciphered, though we have all those written inscriptions available, the script doesn't find a place in the classification of the ancient languages that we saw earlier. And Tamil itself being a huge riddle, not being grouped with any of the languages, it is a riddle embedded in another riddle, while probably if we decipher the Indus Valley script, we might be able to get some answers on the antiquity of the Tamils. And for this, again, historians have gone into a lot of research work, about which we will see in our next episode. Vanakkam.